Hello and welcome to the Blood Reds Transfer Daily. I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com writer James Martin, and we're going to be discussing a little bit about Marco Asensio, who's been linked with Liverpool supposedly by various Spanish outlets. Liverpool are all in for him. Real Madrid value him at around 40 million euros. Liverpool want to pay a lot less than that for a player who has only 1 year left in his current contract. James, what do you make of this rumour? By all accounts, we've heard various reports say Liverpool are done with their incoming arrivals. Asensio has seemingly come out of the blue here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. If anything were to happen, it would be, I think, an opportunistic move rather than one that's been in the pipeline for a while. But the question is whether Liverpool could be tempted by a player who is still surprisingly sort of deceptively young. You know, he feels like he's been on the scene for a long, long time, but still only 26. And yeah, it seems to have fallen a little bit out of favour at Real Madrid. He's often played on the right wing in the past, but now Valverde, who's just a converted central midfielder, is very much the preferred option for them out on the right. And you look at their incomings, the likes of Tchouameni, you think, okay, well, they're Camavinga. If you go back a further season, that they're building the midfield of the future seemingly without Valverde. So that seems like they've made their mind up on the right wing. So it's not really any surprise that he's come up for sale, but equally, he's one of those players who was touted as one of the hottest prospects of the future not so long ago. He's always looked pretty lively when he has featured particularly in Europe is where Liverpool fans will have probably seen him most. He didn't play in the Champions League very much at all last season. I think he only racked up a couple of appearances throughout the campaign. But he's a talent, and he's one that Liverpool could fancy taking a chance on potentially if the price is right, if the wages are right. Like you say, it's not part of the big plan. As far as Liverpool are concerned, incomings are done. But we've seen before, if something happens that they really like the look of, then they will react. So I suppose that's just the question, whether Asensio ticks enough boxes to fall into that category.
Of course, Asensio got an important assist against Manchester City in the Champions League last season, and in that second leg, and I think he got a couple of goals in the Champions League as well. And I think that's what stands out for me is that even though he has had limited minutes, he's scored 10 goals in the Liga and a few in the Champions League as well. So his output is still fairly good despite his limited minutes, and I think that might be something of a standout for Liverpool, as well as the fact that he is a player who has been hyped up as someone who is good for the future, but he's in the prime of his career now, and I think Liverpool would love to have him as an option if he's available for the right price.
Yeah, it's a curious one. It seems to happen quite a lot at Real Madrid. I suppose the obvious comparison is Isco, one of these players who was really heavily hyped as the next really big thing. We're talking potential Ballon d'Or conversations, and his career didn't really drop off. It just seemed to stagnate, and he was just always there at Real Madrid. He was doing almost what Asensio is doing now, sort of popping up, still looking good, like you say, still getting goals, still getting assists, but the minutes sort of slowly faded away, and the hype faded away with it. And I think if you asked him now, he would probably say, for the good of his career, he should have moved at around this time, at around the time Asensio is at now in his career. So I do think from the player's perspective, he'll want to move on, or at least he should want to move on. And I think he's aware of that. The reports from Spain that you alluded to, they're all saying he wants to move in search of more regular game time. I think that could be the biggest sticking point, because much as Liverpool could see an opportunistic opportunity to, boost the squad, improve the overall picture in terms of competing on multiple fronts, I don't think they're going to look at Asensio as a player who can come in and immediately improve the starting 11 as a guaranteed option. So it comes down to whether the player himself would be open to that sort of move.
Yeah, of course. At the same time, Liverpool have also added Fabio Carvalho, and Harvey Elliott is coming through, and Curtis Jones as well, all in very similar positions. So and that's one of the other factors. I think Liverpool may be reluctant to bring in another player of that same profile.
Yeah, I mean, most of the players you referenced there have that kind of dual profile, don't they, where they can play on the wing or in that attacking midfield role, which is exactly the box that Asensio falls into. If you're looking for things that are going for him, he does have fairly balanced match experience on the left and the right flank, which maybe is not necessarily something that those younger options have amassed yet. So there is that level of versatility with both flanks and an attacking midfield role. So yeah, I think you're right. I think it's one of them where if the focus hadn't been on players of that profile in the most recent signings, we could be looking a bit more seriously at Asensio, but it doesn't really make sense to get him in to basically block the minutes of the likes of Elliott, the likes of Carvalho, even Curtis Jones you could put in that same category. So yeah, it doesn't feel like a hugely Liverpool move.
Yeah, and I think the fee as well, the figure that's being touted around in the Spanish media is 40 million euros, which I think is roughly 35 million pounds. That's a big fee for Liverpool to pay for someone who wouldn't necessarily get into the starting 11, having already spent quite a lot this summer. It seems unlikely in that sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different situation to Mane, of course. Mane's 4 years older, his contract's running down, but equally it would be quite sort of, bold, if nothing else. I was going to say galling at first, but maybe not. But it would certainly be a big risk to spend basically all of the Mane money and then a little bit on top of that to bring in who is, someone who's essentially a squad player. And when you look at Mane, who is, of course, central to everything Liverpool have done over the last 6 years, you'd feel like that money had sort of just disappeared down the drain in a heartbeat, really. I think at that price point, there are wiser investments to be made. It's the age is what makes it tempting, because it is just about on the cusp of FSG's peak window. I mean, it's maybe a tiny bit younger, but then you look at Diaz, he came in at 25. They're not averse to buying players who are sort of entering those peak years. So it wouldn't be a crazy purchase. And if Liverpool decided they wanted to go big for it, then I don't think anyone would, criticise it too heavily. And I would trust that FSG decision in that respect. But it would be a surprise. And I think, looking at it objectively, there's probably wiser ways to spend that money.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly, there's a lot of exciting players on the market at the moment. And one of the exciting moves in the Premier League at the moment is Taiwo Awoniyi, who's being linked with a move to Nottingham Forest for £17.5 million. Of course, it's not just exciting because a very young forward and a very good forward is coming from the Bundesliga to the Premier League, but it's also exciting from Liverpool's perspective because that Liverpool inserted a 10% sell-on clause into Origi's contract, so they will be getting a bit of that money. If he does move on to Nottingham Forest, what do you make of that deal? Obviously, Avani is someone we didn't really see at Liverpool. He was always on loan. He did spend, I think, almost 6 years at the club, but we never really got to see him. So do you think it's going to be a success? Have you seen much of Avani since he went to Union Berlin permanently and kind of blew up there?
Yeah, I think you said we inserted a 10% sell on into Origi's contract. I don't think that would help us much with Avani. But yeah, it's exciting for Liverpool. I think it's also quite daunting for Liverpool in the sense that, the money they'll get from it isn't necessarily groundbreaking. It's like you say, 10%. If it's 17.5 million, then that'll be just under £2 million. And that's if it's 10% of the total rather than 10% on top of the profit, which is the sort of clause that Liverpool often do. I'm not sure exactly what it is in the case of Avani, but it's something to watch out for when you're working out these kind of things. But yeah, I think it could be a case of, maybe regret even. Like you say, he was at the club for a long time and he never got that chance. It was not entirely the club's fault. There was various work permit issues, but then the very summer he finally gets the work permit sorted was the one where he got shipped out to Union Berlin. So yeah, he never got a chance, and now he has been given a chance there. He's certainly taken it. I haven't watched him much, but I've watched his numbers. I mean, certainly in the early season, it was extremely impressive. He was keeping pace with Haaland and Lewandowski for a few weeks there. He dropped away a little bit, but not really. He was still sort of, I think, in like the sort of top 10 come the end of the season in terms of Bundesliga goal scorers. He was certainly in and around that mark. and at a club which was not scoring very many goals. He scored a remarkable percentage of their goals. Again, earlier on in the season, it was right up at sort of 50% of their goal contributions. That will have dropped off a little bit, but basically he was involved in a huge degree of this team's goals in one of their best seasons. So certainly a ringing endorsement. And yeah, the fact that there's Premier League interest already suggests that, you know, that he's a tidy player. He's got something about him. And yeah, if he does do well in the Premier League, Liverpool will definitely be looking at that situation and thinking, well, maybe we went too early, particularly with Origi off this summer. It's a case of, well, you know, is that the sort of squad role Awoniyi could have played? We don't know whether he'd have been happy with that sort of role. So same as we were saying with Asensio, really. But if we could have maybe had that conversation with the player, persuaded him to stick around, I think there's probably a role he could have played. But equally, the fact it's gone so well for him since the move suggests that maybe from the player's own perspective, it was time. So yeah, it's really just exciting to see how he gets on in the Premier League.
I think what stood out for me is that his defensive output is really high for a forward as well, which would have suited Jurgen Klopp right down to a T. So it is going to be interesting to see how he does at Nottingham if that move is completed. It's going to be quite a partnership with Brennan Johnson as well, is another one to watch. But yeah, I think that about wraps it up for today. Thanks, James, for joining me. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure to check out the rest of the Blood Red content going out today. Thank you.